Back in late summer of 2009, when the air still clung to the warmth of dying daylight and the streets smelled faintly of sun-scorched concrete, I was searching desperately for a flat before graduate school began. And though I barely knew the city, I found myself lured into the quieter, cheaper parts of town where the listings promised charm, but the reality reeked of mold, grease, and hopelessness until one ad stood out, promising a women-only shared flat, clean, well-lit, and managed by a kind-sounding woman named Jan. And as someone who valued safety and solitude over just about everything else, the idea of living with only women was comforting, reassuring, even. But when I arrived at the viewing, my phone buzzed with a message saying Jan was too busy and that her brother-in-law would be showing me around instead. And something in my gut turned cold and hollow, but I brushed it off as paranoia and climbed the creaking stairs above a row of boarded-up shops, where he greeted me with a look too hungry to be polite and too calm to be harmless. And the moment he opened the door to the flat, I knew something was wrong because it didn't look empty or staged like in the photos. It looked lived in, and not in the comforting way you expect from a home, but in the disorganized, stale-socked, cheap aftershave, yellowed mattress kind of way that felt distinctly male, and yet I kept walking forward, my mind not quite catching up with my instincts, until I noticed he wouldn't answer when I asked again and again whether the current occupants were female, instead redirecting me toward the bedroom, and then the bathroom, which, when opened, unleashed a wave of rot so thick it curled the edges of my vision and made my stomach twist, and I lied, saying I wanted to see the kitchen, but I was already backing away, already thinking of the door, already planning my retreat, when something about the scattered belongings in the flat made my skin crawl. Razors in the sink, a muddy boot print on the tile, hair in the plug hole that was too short and too coarse to be from any woman. And I asked again who lived here, but he just smiled and said to follow him. And when I called Jan's number to ask directly, it was his pocket that lit up, his pocket that buzzed, his hand that slowly moved to silence the ringtone. And in that awful moment of confirmation, I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes, the look of a predator caught mid-pounce. And I ran. I didn't even think, I just ran, but the corridor felt too long, and he moved faster than he should have, grabbed my hair and yanked me, so hard my skull flared with pain and my knees buckled. And I remember screaming louder than I'd ever screamed before, loud enough to shatter my voice, loud enough to rattle the door frames. But the building remained dead and silent, just me and him and the stink of decay as he dragged me backwards, and I kicked and punched and fought like an animal, because I knew, with perfect clarity, that if I let him pull me into that bathroom, I would never leave again. And I don't remember every detail because something must have knocked me out, because one minute I was clawing at the carpet and the next I was waking up on the bedroom floor, dizzy, scalp burning, as he tried to pull me by my arm toward that foul-smelling door, but I rolled over and grabbed his wrist and bit him as hard as I could until I tasted blood. And he screamed, but not the scream of someone in pain. It was the scream of someone whose plan was falling apart. And when he reached for me again, I dug my fingers straight in his eyes, pushed deep until I felt them squish beneath my nails. And that was the first time I heard him beg, sobbing and cursing and howling as he covered his face and stumbled backward, giving me just enough time to crawl, stagger, and finally burst out the door into the daylight, where I ran down the metal stairs, screaming so hysterically that a woman on the street thought I'd been stabbed. And when I saw my reflection in the window of a parked car and noticed all the blood streaking my face, for a moment I believed it too, but the worst damage wasn't visible. The panic, the way my body shook, the way my mind struggled to keep my knees from buckling, because I knew he was still up there, blinded or not. And I knew that if not for sheer dumb luck and a savage will to survive, I could have been just another missing girl in a city that forgets people as easily as it swallows them. And though the police eventually caught him, and though he got his pitiful sentence, 6 years for what he tried to do to me, I still wake some nights in a sweat, convinced I'll see his face in my window or hear his footsteps behind me when I'm walking home. Because deep down I know that men like him don't stop. They wait, they scheme, and they strike when you're tired and desperate and just trying to find a place to live. And the thought that he'll be free again soon haunts me more than anything else, because next time, the girl might not get away. It's been over a decade now, And people always say time dulls the edge of trauma, but the mind heals. That memory becomes a faded scar instead of an open wound. But they're wrong. Or maybe they're just lying to themselves because they've never felt something clawing up their spine when a door creaks open slightly too slow, or heard the sound of someone breathing behind them when they know with absolute certainty that they're alone. Because I still remember the smell of that apartment, the way his fingers tangled in my hair, the sheer animal intent in his face when he realized I knew. And though I moved cities, changed my name, saw therapists, took the pills, burned the clothes I wore that day, and even the backpack I had on, none of it worked because some things don't get buried. They wait, they linger, they rot in silence like a wound that never stops bleeding. And I thought it was over until 3 weeks ago, when a friend I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me out of nowhere, saying she found an apartment listing online that looked suspiciously familiar, not just in layout, but in language. The same phrasing, the same too good to be true rent, the same women-only promise, the same fake-sounding name at the bottom of the ad. And when she sent me the screenshots, I felt like my lungs collapsed because I recognized it immediately. The chipped molding around the windows, the greasy light above the hallway. Even the view from the balcony, unchanged, still overlooking. The same broken sign of that boarded-up convenience store across the road. And that was the moment I knew he was out. That 6 years was never going to be enough for what he'd done. That the world had let him slip through the cracks like slime down a drain. And now he was doing it again, fishing for another girl who didn't know better. And I tried calling the police, tried giving them everything I had, his old name, the flat's address, my case number, but they said unless there was a new crime, new victim, their hands were tied, that the listing wasn't enough. And I realized then just how quickly this world forgets the monsters it breeds, how bureaucracy will always fail the people it's meant to protect. So I went back, not because I wanted revenge, not even because I thought I could stop him, but because something in me, some old rusted gear, had finally started to turn again, not with fear, but with purpose. And I needed to see, needed to know whether he was truly out there again, whether I was chasing ghosts. So I drove 6 hours back to that city. I swore I'd never set foot in again, my hands shaking the whole way, parked across the street from the same cracked facade, waited until the sun went down, until the shadows crept long across the pavement like fingers reaching for something they'd lost. And sure enough, just after 8 p.m., the building's door opened and a girl came out, young, maybe 19 or 20, backpack slung over one shoulder, scrolling her phone, walking quickly, not knowing that the air behind her reeked of history and blood. And when she disappeared down the block, I looked up and saw him, standing at the same window where I'd once seen my own reflection twisted with panic. Only this time it was his silhouette watching me, calm, still like he expected me, like he knew I'd come, and my breath caught in my throat because he raised one hand, slowly, deliberately, not to wave, but to press a single finger to his lips, and I swear to God I felt the whole city fall silent for a second, like the buildings knew what he'd done, and were ashamed they still stood around him. And I wanted to run. I did. I wanted to disappear again, change my name again, burn everything again, but I didn't because something colder than fear had taken root in me now, something like resolve. And I waited until he closed the curtains and then walked up those same metal stairs, step by step, each one echoing like a drumbeat in my skull until I reached the top. And there it was, same door, same number, the paint now more peeled than before. And I raised my hand and knocked, but stopped because I could hear something from inside. Not voices, not music, but the faint rhythmic sound of sobbing, muffled, weak like it was coming through a wall or from under a bed. And I knew then that there was someone else in that flat, someone who hadn't gone away like I had. I didn't know. I kicked hard until the lock gave, until the door swung open. And I was swallowed again by that smell, not just rot, but bleach and blood and fear. And he was there, standing in the hallway like he'd been waiting for me all these years. And he smiled, that same smile he wore when he first opened the door all those years ago, like nothing had changed, like no time had passed at all. And in his other hand was a pair of keys, not to the flat, but to a padlock, which I found later was attached to a storage unit down the block, where the police would eventually find 3 phones, 2 passports, and a drawer full of IDs that didn't belong to him. And when I lunged at him, I didn't scream, didn't cry, just moved like I was underwater, slow, but unstoppable. And this time I didn't run. I made sure he couldn't either. And when the police came, when they dragged him away, he didn't fight, didn't struggle, just smiled and said, "She always comes back." And the worst part is, I think he was right, because in my dreams, I'm still in that flat, still clawing. The carpet, still trying to scream. And sometimes when I'm fully awake, I think I hear a knock at the door, not loud, just a gentle tap-tap, like someone checking to see if I'm still alive. They kept him this time, or so they said, locked away somewhere without windows, where the light never changes and the air smells like rubber gloves and expired disinfectant. But I don't believe them. Not really, because monsters like him don't get locked up. They burrow, they split, they shed their skin and crawl into the cracks of places no one watches closely. And for a while, I tried to convince myself it was over, that the sobbing girl was safe now, that I had done what needed to be done. But nights became worse, not better, because sleep doesn't come easy when your mind is a labyrinth of unopened doors, and mine is full of them, each one whispering, each one holding something I can't quite look at directly without feeling like my skin might peel away. And then I started receiving letters. No postmark, no return address, just folded pages slipped under my apartment door in the middle of the night, written in handwriting I didn't recognize, except for the shape of the R, that sharp downward stroke that matched the notes he used to leave on the fridge before I ever knew what he was. And at first they were vague, lines from books, snippets of poems, riddles about clocks and time cages. But then they became more direct, more personal, mentioning things only someone who had been there would know. The color of the wallpaper in my childhood bedroom, the scar on my ankle from the dog, the song my mother used to hum when she thought I was asleep. And I started to wonder if it was really him writing them, or if he had passed something on, if his madness was a kind of virus. And I had become infected simply by surviving, because I started seeing people watching me. On the subway, in the grocery store, a man with a mole on his cheek who seemed to follow me from block to block. Always 10 paces behind, a woman in the library who never checked out a book, but always sat 2 rows over, scribbling furiously in a journal with a red pen that never seemed to run out of ink. And then the girl, the one from the flat, showed up at my door one night, her eyes wide and glassy like she hadn't slept since I pulled her out. And she didn't speak at first, just handed me a box, small, wooden, locked with a strange rusted clasp, and said only, he said you'd understand. And then she turned and left before I could stop her, disappearing down the hall as if the walls swallowed her. And I stared at the box for hours, unable to open it, feeling its weight grow. My hands like something was moving inside, slow and wet. And when I finally forced the latch with a screwdriver, I found inside a single cassette tape, unlabeled, and a photo, black and white, grainy, showing what looked like an empty room with something barely visible in the shadows. Something human-shaped, but too tall, too thin, and its eyes were where I should have been, were perfectly white like overexposed film. And I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up hours later to the sound. The tape playing from the other room, even though I hadn't touched it, and my cassette player had been broken for years, but there was whirring softly, hissing with static, and then a voice, low and patient, reciting names hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one slower than the last. And when it finally said mine, I swear I felt the walls tremble slightly like the wind leaving in time with the voice. And I tore the tape out, threw it in the bathtub, turned on the faucet, and watched the water run red for a few seconds before it cleared. I haven't told anyone, because what would I even say that a ghost who isn't dead is still haunting me through people who shouldn't exist? But I think there's a network, a web, a congregation of sorts that he belongs to, or maybe founded. People who collect stories like mine and feed on them, spreading them like mold through forgotten buildings and whispered warnings. Because I started researching and found stories, old ones, buried in forums and scan pages of defunct zines, about men who looked like him, who acted like him, about flats with the same layout popping up in cities across the country, sometimes even using the same ad copy name. And it all circles back to the same symbol etched into the corner of the photo from the box, a crude, almost childish drawing of an eye inside a house, crossed out with a jagged X. Now, I see it sometimes. Spray painted in alleys, scratched into bathroom stalls, drawn in the condensation on my window. I think I understand now, or maybe I'm just unraveling the way he said I would. Because in the last letter, the one I found inside my fridge of all places, the handwriting was different again, smaller, tighter, more like my own, and the message was only 4 words long, but it was enough to make my blood freeze. You brought him back, and I don't know if that means I summoned something, or if by surviving, I became something else. Something that attracts him, or maybe I was never the victim at all. Maybe I was just another carrier, another step in the infection chain. And now, every mirror in my apartment shows things that aren't quite right. The angle of my reflection off, the smile too wide, the eyes watching when I turn away, and the knocking has started again, soft at first, like raindrops on a window, but louder each night, always around 3:33 a.m., always followed by silence. So deep it feels like my ears have stopped working, and sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear my own voice whisper from under the bed, telling me to check the closet. And I never do, because I know what I'll find there, crouched in the dark, smiling like he used to, holding out another letter with my name already written in blood across the empty. The knocking grew relentless, pounding on the walls like the heartbeat of something desperate to get in. And sleep became a distant memory, a fading dream I chased but could never quite reach, because with every passing night the lines between reality and nightmare blurred further, and I started to wonder if the whole city was a trap, a stage set for something ancient and hungry to feed on fear. And in that endless twilight, I found myself drawn back to the girl, the one I rescued, who had vanished like smoke, but left me that box and tape, because she was the only link to the madness I couldn't escape. So I searched for her, scouring every abandoned building, every rundown motel, every shadowed street corner where she might hide. And finally I found her in the ruins of an old asylum on the edge of town, her eyes hollow, her voice a whisper, telling me stories of others, of families torn apart, of whispers in the walls, of faces in the mirrors that weren't theirs, and how they all belonged to something called the Watchers, an ancient cult that thrived on the forgotten, the lost, the broken souls who slipped through the cracks of the city, gathering their stories like currency, trading secrets that unravel minds, spreading madness like wildfire in dry bush. As she spoke, I felt the weight of her words like chains around my chest, because I saw it in her eyes. She was not just a victim, but a witness, maybe even a servant. And the tape, the letters, the symbols were all part of their ritual, a way to bind those who survived to the cult's will, to weave their pain into an eternal tapestry of fear. And she warned me that I was marked, that by surviving it, by opening that box, I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Because the Watchers don't just collect stories, they harvest souls, twisting them until the truth becomes alive, until reality fractures and the world becomes a maze with no exit. And then she showed me the symbol again, the eye in the house crossed out, explaining it was a sigil meant to both imprison and invoke, a paradoxical emblem that traps the Watcher and the watched in an endless dance. And I realized the knocking wasn't just at my door, it was inside my head, echoing in my thoughts, reminding me that I was never alone, never truly safe, and that the city itself was alive with Watchers, faceless entities hiding behind every reflection, every crack in the pavement, every flicker of static on my phone screen. And then came the dreams, vivid, terrifying, of wandering endless corridors lined with portraits whose eyes followed me, of descending spirals where voices called my name in languages I couldn't understand but felt in my bones, and waking up with my skin crawling, with bruises blooming like black flowers on my arms that no one could explain, and I knew I had to fight. But fighting felt futile when your enemy is woven into the fabric of your existence. And so I began to seek answers, digging through forbidden texts, contacting occult historians, piecing together fragments of lore about the Watchers, about shadow cults that once ruled cities in secret, about rituals that blurred the boundaries between life and death, sanity and madness, about the cost of knowledge when it comes too late. And the deeper I went, the more I understood that my own story was just a thread in a tapestry of horror that stretched back centuries, tangled with bloodlines and curses, and maybe, just maybe, the reason I had survived was to become the next guardian of the secrets, the next carrier of the plague, the next link in the chain, because the Watchers don't just hunt, they create, they corrupt, they consume. And in the end, you don't defeat them by fighting, but by surrendering, by becoming part of their endless story. And as the knocking at my door turned into a scratching, and then a whisper promising release if I only opened just a little bit more. I felt the cold acceptance settling over me, like a shroud, because some doors, once opened, can never be closed again, and I reached out, trembling, my hand hovering over the doorknob, knowing that whatever waited on the other side was no longer just a thing of nightmares. It was my destiny. As my trembling hand finally closed around the cold doorknob, a shiver ran down my spine. Not from fear, but from a strange, almost hypnotic calm that washed over me, as if surrendering to the unknown was the only way to escape the unbearable weight of resistance. And with a slow, deliberate turn, the door creaked open, revealing not the empty hallway I expected, but a swirling void of shadows and faint whispers. A shifting space that seemed to breathe and pulse with a life of its own, drawing me forward like a moth to a flame I both feared and desired. And stepping through that threshold, the world around me dissolved into a kaleidoscope of fractured memories and forgotten faces, where time twisted and stretched until moments felt like centuries, and I found myself in a dimly lit chamber lined with countless mirrors, each reflecting a different version of myself. Some smiling, others screaming, some bleeding, and all watching me with hollow eyes that held secrets I couldn't begin to comprehend. And in the center of the room stood a figure cloaked in darkness, neither fully human nor entirely otherworldly, its voice a chorus of echoes that spoke directly into my mind, telling me that I had crossed into the realm. Watchers, a place beyond the physical, where souls were weighed and stories were bartered like currency. And here, I was to face the truth behind the box, the tape, and the girl who vanished into thin air, because she was not a victim but a key, a messenger sent to prepare me for what lay ahead, a trial that would test the very essence of my being. And as the figure reached out, its hand dissolving into shards of glass that floated around me like falling stars, I was flooded with visions of ancient rituals performed under blood moons, desperate souls screaming as their stories were ripped from their minds and woven into a tapestry of darkness, of a city long dead beneath the wandering moon, buried beneath layers of forgotten grief and suppressed terror. And through it all, the watchers watched, patient and relentless, their presence a constant shadow lurking just beyond perception. And I realized that to survive, I would have to embrace the paradox they embodied, to become both hunter and hunted, to learn their language of silence and fear, to trade my own story for a chance to rewrite the ending. Because in their realm, stories were more than memories. They were weapons, prisons, and keys all at once. And as the mirrors around me shattered, releasing shards that embedded themselves in my skin like painful reminders, the figure spoke one last truth, that freedom was an illusion, and the only escape was to accept the story as part of myself and let it guide me through the labyrinth of madness. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind teetering on the edge of reason, I stepped deeper into the darkness, knowing that every step forward was a step further from who I once was, and closer to becoming a part of the endless watch that never sleeps. As I moved deeper into the twisting corridors of this surreal prison of mirrors and shadows, the air thickened with a cold so sharp it felt like it was scraping my very soul, and every step echoed with the distant sound of voices, whispers at first, then cries, then a cacophony of anguish that clawed at the edges of my sanity. And I realized that these were not merely echoes, but the trapped stories of countless others who had wandered too far into the Watcher's realm, their memories fragmented and scattered, waiting for someone like me to piece them together or become yet another lost fragment in the endless maze. And suddenly, the walls around me began to ripple like liquid glass, revealing fleeting images of my own past. The shattered flat viewings, the man with the hollow eyes, the cold sting of his grip tearing at my hair, and the suffocating smell of that bathroom that lingered like a curse. And through these visions, a new layer of horror unfolded. I was not just a survivor, but a beacon, unknowingly drawing other lost souls into the same trap. A beacon for the darkness lurking beneath the city streets. A darkness fed by fear, isolation, and despair. And as I stumbled forward, The floor beneath me fractured and gave way, plunging me into a subterranean chamber illuminated by flickering candles that cast grotesque shadows on the walls, where I saw faces pressed against the stone like ghosts trying to escape their eternal confinement. And in the center of the chamber, an ancient book, its pages worn and stained, whispering promises of forbidden knowledge and terrible truths. And as I reached out to touch it, a cold hand gripped my wrist, and I spun around to see a figure, half human, half shadow, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger, warning me that some stories were never meant to be told, some doors never meant to be opened. But it was too late to turn back, and with trembling fingers, I opened the book to a page that described a ritual capable of breaking the cycle of the Watchers, a ritual that required sacrifice, courage, and a willingness to become a story yourself, trapped in the ink and binding until another desperate soul could search it. And as I read on, the chamber around me began to warp and twist, and I understood that I was being tested, that the darkness was probing for weakness, for doubt, for any crack through which it could consume me entirely. And I clenched my fists, forcing back the rising tide of despair that turned me, to fight back not just for my own survival, but for every lost soul caught in this endless nightmare. And with the book cradled in my arms, I set out to find the fragments of my own story scattered through the labyrinth, knowing that to reclaim my life, I had to embrace the darkness without becoming part of it. And as I walked, the shadows whispered promises and threats alike, their voices weaving a chilling symphony that threatened to drown out my own thoughts. But I pushed forward because, somewhere deep inside, beyond the fear and pain, a spark of hope still flickered. A hope that maybe, just maybe, stories like mine could end not in silence and shadows, but in light. With the ancient book pressed tightly to my chest, I ventured further into the labyrinthine depths beneath the city, where time seemed to stretch and fold like a living thing, each step drawing me closer to the heart of the darkness that had ensnared so many before me. And as I moved, faint flickers of light began to appear ahead, dim glimmers that danced like fireflies trapped in a jar, guiding me toward a hidden sanctuary, a place whispered about in the broken memories trapped within mirrors, a place called the Hollow Sanctuary, said to be where the boundary between the living and the lost thinned to a fragile veil. And when I finally arrived, I found it was a vast cavern lined with crystalline structures that hummed with an eerie resonance, pulsing softly like the heartbeat of the underworld itself. And at its center stood a towering statue carved from obsidian, a figure cloaked in shadow, its face obscured but radiating an undeniable power. And as I stepped closer, the air around me thickened with ancient magic, a power older than the city above, waiting to be awakened or condemned. And I realized this was the source of the Watcher's power, the wellspring of the curse that had trapped souls like me, twisting them into reflections of fear and despair. And turning away was no longer an option. To break free, I had to confront this darkness head-on, drawing on the knowledge within the ancient book. And as I began the ritual inscribed on the fragile pages, chanting words that felt both foreign and familiar, the cavern trembled, shadows swirling violently, as if the very fabric of the world was tearing apart. And in that moment, I understood that the sacrifice demanded was not just of blood, but of memory. Each phrase uttered severed a fragment of my past, erasing moments of hope, joy, and pain, leaving me hollow but focused, a vessel for the light that might shatter the curse. And as the final words left my lips, a blinding burst of energy exploded through the sanctuary, shattering mirrors, breaking chains, and releasing a flood of trapped souls who cried out in gratitude and sorrow as they were finally freed from their eternal prison. But even in victory, I felt a profound emptiness where my memories had once lived, and I knew that all the darkness had been beaten back. The cost was mine alone to bear, a price I was willing to pay if it meant no one else would suffer as I had. And stepping out from the depths into the dawn of a new day, I carried with me not just the scars of the past, but the fragile hope that even in the darkest places, light could find a way to break through. Emerging from the shadows of the Hollow Sanctuary, I found myself beneath a sky slowly brightening with the first hesitant streaks of dawn. But the city around me felt irrevocably altered, as if some unseen veil had been lifted only to reveal a deeper, darker reality lurking beneath the familiar streets and buildings. The air was thick with an oppressive silence that seemed to cling to my skin like a second shadow. And though the entity's prison had been sealed once more, its malevolent presence still radiated faintly from the earth itself, whispering through cracks in the pavement, rustling the leaves of abandoned parks, and echoing down empty alleyways with voices I could almost, but not quite, comprehend, as if the souls trapped inside the obsidian statue were not entirely free. Their anguish and fury left lingering, refusing to rest, their desperate cries mingling with the night's chill and etching themselves deep into my mind. I realized that my ordeal was far from over. The darkness I had fought was ancient and cunning, woven into the very fabric of the city's history and sustained by human fear and suffering. And so I resolved to uncover the truth behind the curse, to seek out the origins of this evil that had shadowed generations before me, tracing its lineage through brittle manuscripts, half-forgotten legends, and the cryptic murmurs of old scholars who had dared to study the occult. And as I pieced together fragments of this sinister puzzle, I discovered that the obsidian statue was merely a shard of a far greater and far older power, a primordial entity, a being of infinite malice and hunger, imprisoned beneath the earth by secretive cults who had sacrificed everything, including their own souls, to bind it in chains of forgotten magic. Yet those chains were weakening, fractured by time and human neglect, allowing tendrils of darkness to seep out and infect the hearts of the vulnerable and the wicked alike, twisting their minds into instruments of chaos and despair. Driven by a need not only to protect myself, but to save the city from descending into madness, I sought out others who had encountered this darkness and survived, strangers bound by shared nightmares and a mutual longing for life. And together we formed an uneasy alliance, each bearing scars from battles both visible and invisible, each haunted by our own pasts, yet united by an unyielding determination to confront the shadows. We combined ancient rites unearthed from dusty tomes with modern technology and knowledge, crafting protective wards and rituals designed to strengthen the seals and repel the entity's influence. But even as we worked, unsettling phenomena began to emerge around us. Visions bleeding into waking moments, disembodied whispers creeping from the walls, fleeting shadows twisting unnaturally in the corner of my eye, and a creeping sense of being watched that never quite dissipated, signs that the entity was awake, testing our defenses and probing for weaknesses. I understood that the battle we faced was not simply one of physical confrontation, but a profound struggle for the soul, forcing each of us to face our darkest fears and the fragile threads of hope that sustained us. And in those moments of doubt, the entity's presence felt overwhelming, like a tide of despair threatening to drown me. But I clung to the knowledge that light, even the smallest flicker, could pierce the deepest darkness. As dawn finally broke, spilling gold and warmth over the city, I steeled myself for what was to come, knowing that every step forward would be a battle against not only the external evil, but the shadows within, a fight to reclaim the city's soul, and, perhaps more importantly, my own fragile humanity in the process. Emerging from the depths into the first light of dawn, I found the city transformed, where shadows had once clung like a suffocating fog. Now there was a fragile clarity, as if the world itself was breathing again, but the air was heavy with silence, the echoes of the freed souls lingering like a bittersweet song that only I could hear. And as I walked through the empty streets, memories I had lost began to flicker faintly in the corners of my mind. Not as vivid as before, but enough to remind me of who I was and what I had fought for. Yet the city's people remained unaware, their eyes hollow, burdened by the remnants of the curse that lingered in the cracks of reality. And I realized my journey was far from over. The battle beneath the earth had been only the beginning, for darkness always seeks a way back, and the true challenge was to rekindle hope in a world that had nearly forgotten it. And so I became a guardian of the city's forgotten stories, wandering from shadowed alleyways to forgotten libraries, sharing whispers of a truth hidden beneath the surface, teaching others to see beyond fear. And slowly, very slowly, life began to return, the laughter, children, the scent of blooming flowers and abandoned gardens, the warmth of human connection rekindling like embers in a cold heart. Yet I never forgot the price I had paid, the memories erased from my soul that made me both stronger and more vulnerable, a reminder that sacrifice was the shadow beneath every light. And in that acceptance, I found peace, not in forgetting what was lost, but in honoring it by forging a future where light could outlast the darkness. Then, as the sun climbed higher, casting long golden rays across the city's rooftops, I understood that some stories never truly end. They live on in the courage of those who choose to remember, to fight, and to hope. And with that thought, I stepped forward into the new day, ready to protect the fragile life I had fought so hard to restore. The fragile calm of dawn gave way to a day charged with an uneasy energy, the city's streets seeming simultaneously more alive and more haunted, as if the very essence of the darkness was now woven into the waking world, bleeding through cracks in reality and manifesting in subtle but insidious ways that tested the limits of my sanity and resolve. People I passed bore hollow looks, eyes shadowed with unspoken fears, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking my every movement. A reminder that the entity's reach was far greater than I had imagined, its influence spreading like a slow poison through the hearts of those it sought to control or consume. My companions and I moved cautiously, sharing whispered warnings and exchanging fragments of information that hinted at the entity's next moves. But with every step, the boundaries between nightmare and reality became fluid, and the rituals and words we had painstakingly prepared seemed to offer only fragile, temporary relief. In the midst of this growing chaos, I discovered a new clue, an ancient, weathered journal hidden in the archives of forgotten library, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and the desperate scrawlings of a long-dead guardian who had once fought against the same primordial darkness. The journal spoke of a ritual not just to bind but to banish, a last hope that required a sacrifice of unimaginable magnitude, a fusion of willpower and purity that might sever the entity's connection to this world forever. Yet the cost was terrifying. To perform it, one must confront the entity within its own realm, a shadow dimension that existed parallel to our own, where the rules of time and space warped and twisted into grotesque forms, and where the entity's power was absolute, feeding on fear and despair like a beast awakened from a millennial-long slumber. Despite the dread that churned in my stomach, the urgency of our mission left no room for hesitation. The darkness was gathering strength with every passing hour, infecting the city's soul and twisting those it touched into unrecognizable horrors. And I knew that to hesitate was to doom not only myself, but everyone I cared about to a fate worse than death. Eternal torment under the entity's merciless rule. As night fell again, colder and more oppressive than before, my group prepared for the journey into the shadow world, drawing strength from our fragile bonds and the shared hope that light could yet prevail. We gathered relics and talismans imbued with ancient magic, recited incantations that called upon forgotten gods and forces of the natural world, and steeled ourselves to walk through the veil, separating our reality from the entity's dark dominion. Crossing into that shadow dimension was like plunging into a nightmare made flesh, where the very air seemed to pulse with malevolent intent, and the landscape twisted in impossible geometries, a labyrinth of despair designed to break the mind and crush the spirit. Here, I confronted visions of my deepest fears and darkest regrets, shadows of the past clawing at my resolve. But the memory of those I had sworn to protect pushed me onward, a beacon in the suffocating darkness. Our battle within this realm was brutal and relentless, a clash of wills that tore at the fabric of both worlds. And though we faced unimaginable horrors, each of us found hidden reserves of courage and strength, forging a connection between our souls that defied the entity's attempts to isolate and destroy us. In the final moments, as the ritual reached its crescendo, I understood that the sacrifice demanded was not just physical, but spiritual, a surrender of ego and fear to the light of hope and love. And as I embraced that truth, the entity's hold began to crumble, its screams echoing through the shadow realm as chains of ancient magic wrapped around it, binding it once more and sealing the gateway between worlds. Emerging back into the dawn of our reality, battered but victorious, I realized that the battle against darkness is never truly over, that evil sleeps but never dies, and that the light we carry within us is the most powerful weapon we possess. Fragile, yes, but enduring, a spark that can ignite even the deepest shadows and bring forth a new day. The victory we had won came at a price that lingered in the depths of my soul. The scars invisible but no less real, a constant reminder that darkness, though pushed back, never truly disappears, but only waits for the moment to return stronger, more cunning, and more insidious. As days turned into weeks, the city slowly began to heal, its wounds closing and the shadows receding into forgotten corners. But beneath the surface, whispers of unease stirred among those who had felt the presence of the entity too keenly to forget, and I found myself haunted by dreams and visions, flickers of that shadow realm bleeding into my waking hours, urging me to remain vigilant, for the battle was far from over. The journal's warnings echoed in my mind. Darkness takes many forms and feeds not only on fear, but on complacency and doubt. And so I dedicated myself to mastering the ancient knowledge, seeking allies among those who, like me, had glimpsed the abyss and survived, a secret network bound by a shared purpose to guard against the unseen threats lurking beyond the veil of ordinary life. My companions, each marked by the ordeal, carried their own burdens and fears, yet together we forged a fragile hope, traveling beyond the city to uncover other places touched by the entity's influence, ancient sites of power that could either amplify the darkness or be harnessed as beacons of light. With every discovery, the history of this eternal struggle unfolded like a vast tapestry, revealing cycles of rise and fall, heroes and betrayals, sacrifices and resilience woven into the fabric of time. Among these revelations was the truth that the entity was but one manifestation of a far greater cosmic imbalance, a ripple in the vast ocean of existence caused by forgotten wars among primordial forces, and that humanity's role was both perilous and profound, a nexus where light and shadow intersected, shaping the destiny of worlds beyond our own. This knowledge compelled me to seek out sages, mystics, and scholars who had guarded fragments of forbidden wisdom across generations, learning that the path to lasting peace lay not only in battles and rituals, but in understanding, compassion, and the unity of disparate souls bound by common cause. It became clear that the darkness exploited division and isolation, and that only through connection, empathy, and shared strength could its advance be halted. As I delved deeper, the lines between friend and foe blurred. Alliances formed in unexpected places, and ancient grudges threatened to unravel the fragile coalition we had built. Trust became a precious commodity, tested by deceit and temptation, and every choice carried weight beyond the immediate, shaping not only our survival, but the fate of future generations. The city itself, once a battleground, transformed into a sanctuary and a beacon, where those who had faced the darkness found refuge and purpose, training to become guardians and bearers of light, ready to confront whatever new shadows might rise. The rituals grew more refined, the magic more potent, and the stories of heroism and sacrifice inspired hope that even in the darkest times, the human spirit could shine with a brilliance that no shadow could extinguish. Yet beneath this surface of hope, the restless currents of the unseen world whispered still, reminding me that vigilance was eternal, and that the balance we fought to maintain was delicate and ever-shifting, a dance of light and darkness that defined the essence of existence itself, urging me to prepare, to to learn, and to lead. For the true test was not the defeat of one, but the unending commitment to face the shadows that dwell in every heart, and to kindle the light that could dispel them generation after generation. In the quiet aftermath of our hard-won peace, a new chapter unfolded, not with the clashing of swords or the roar of battle, but through whispers carried by the wind. Subtle signs that the world was shifting in ways both wondrous and dangerous. For while we had pushed back the darkness that once threatened to consume us, the scars it left behind served as gateways for other forces to stir. Ancient beings whose motives were inscrutable, neither wholly good nor evil, and whose arrival heralded a profound transformation of the reality we thought we knew. I found myself drawn to forgotten ruins and sacred places, where the veil between worlds was thin and where the echoes of lost civilizations resonated with secrets begging to be uncovered. Each step revealing that the battle for balance was no longer confined to a single city or a lone entity, but stretched across realms, dimensions, and time itself, a cosmic web of cause and effect in which humanity played a pivotal, if precarious, role. Among the revelations was the discovery of an enigmatic artifact, a relic imbued with the power to alter the very fabric of existence, capable of both salvation and destruction depending on the will of its bearer. And this knowledge sparked a race against shadowy factions, some seeking to wield its might for domination, others striving to protect it as a last hope for harm. The alliances I had forged were tested anew as trust wavered under the strain of uncertainty and fear, forcing me to navigate a labyrinth of political intrigue, hidden agendas, and ancient rivalries that threatened to unravel the fragile unity we had built. Yet through this turmoil, I found strength in unexpected friendships and the unwavering courage of those who chose light over darkness, even when the path was shrouded in doubt. As we ventured deeper into this unfolding mystery, the boundaries between magic and science blurred, and new understandings emerged. Technologies once thought impossible harnessed alongside arcane rituals, creating a synthesis that challenged old beliefs and opened doors to uncharted possibilities, where the key to survival lay not only in combat, but in innovation, empathy, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. The world around us seemed to breathe with renewed vitality. Landscapes shifted, flora and fauna evolving in response to the growing energies unleashed by our struggle, reminding us that we were part of a living, interconnected whole, and that every action rippled outward in ways both subtle and profound, binding us ever tighter to the fate of the planet and beyond. Yet amid these marvels, shadows lingered, remnants of ancient hatred, echoes of forgotten wars, and the creeping influence of despair that sought to fracture our resolve and plunge us once more into chaos. It became clear that the greatest challenge lay not in vanquishing external foes, but in confronting the darkness within ourselves and each other, in embracing vulnerability, forgiveness, and the courage to change. Guided by these truths, I committed myself to a new mission, not merely to protect and fight, but to heal and unite, to build a legacy where hope could flourish even in the face of adversity, where stories of resilience inspired future generations to stand firm against the tides of darkness, and where the light we kindled together would shine across the ages, a beacon to all who dared to dream of a better world. And so, as the stars wheeled overhead and dawn painted the horizon with hues of possibility, I knew our journey was far from over, that every ending was but a new beginning, and that the dance of light and shadow would continue, endless and eternal, as long as there were hearts brave enough to face the night and souls willing to carry the flame, as the days unfolded into weeks and the weeks into months. The weight of our responsibility grew heavier, yet it was balanced by a burgeoning sense of purpose that infused every moment with meaning. For we were no longer mere survivors caught in the currents of fate, but active architects shaping the destiny of our world and those beyond it, drawing strength from the bonds forged in fire and the wisdom gleaned from ancient tomes and forgotten prophecies. The artifact we had uncovered became both a beacon and a burden, its powers awakening dormant energies within us and in the lands we traversed, revealing hidden truths about our origins, the interconnectedness of all life, and the fragile equilibrium that maintained the cosmos, a revelation that challenged long-held beliefs and demanded a new paradigm of understanding and coexistence. Alongside this enlightenment came new adversaries, beings born of chaos and entropy who thrived on discord and sought to unravel the delicate threads we had woven. Their presence a constant reminder that vigilance was the price of peace, and that the battles fought were not only against external forces, but also against the fears and doubts that lurked within our own hearts. Amidst this turmoil, we encountered other groups and individuals who shared our vision, yet followed different paths. Scholars, mystics, warriors, and inventors whose diverse perspectives enriched our cause and highlighted the importance of unity and diversity. For it was through collaboration and the melding of strengths that we could hope to overcome the myriad challenges ahead. Our journey took us across vast and varied landscapes. Ancient forests where the trees whispered secrets in forgotten tongues. Sprawling deserts where shimmering mirages masked gateways to other realms. And towering mountains whose peaks pierced the heavens and tested our resolve. Each location a crucible of trials and revelations that deepened our understanding of the world's mysteries and our place within it. The lines between friend and foe blurred as alliances shifted and motivations revealed themselves in shades of gray, compelling us to question not only whom we could trust, but also the very nature of good and evil. And in this complexity, we found that true strength lay not in rigid dogma, but in empathy, humility, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. Through countless challenges and heartaches, moments of despair were tempered by flashes of joy and wonder. The birth of new life, the rekindling of ancient magics, the forging of unbreakable friendships. And in these moments, the essence of our quest became clear. To nurture hope where it had been extinguished, to kindle light in the darkest corners, and to create a legacy of resilience and harmony that would endure long after we were gone. And so, as the tapestry of our story continued to weave itself across the fabric of time and space, we moved forward with steadfast hearts and open minds, ready to face whatever shadows or wonders awaited us, knowing that in every challenge lay the seed of transformation, and that the greatest power of all was the unyielding spirit to rise, rebuild, and dream anew. As our journey continued through shifting landscapes and ever-changing challenges, the bonds between us deepened beyond mere camaraderie into something profound and enduring. For each encounter and revelation etched itself onto our souls like inscriptions of ancient stone, reminding us that our quest was not just about external conquest or discovery, but about transformation within, the awakening of dormant potential and the alignment purpose and spirit. The artifact's true nature began to reveal itself more clearly, showing us that it was not merely a relic of power, but a key to unlocking the latent energies woven into the very fabric of existence. Energies that could heal or destroy, depending on the intentions of those who wield it, prompting a careful dance of trust and caution as we learn to harness its gifts while guarding against its corrupting influence. Along the way, we encountered communities that had adapted in extraordinary ways to the new world. Tribes who communed with elemental forces, sages who preserved knowledge lost to time, and visionaries who dreamed of a future where harmony reigned over discord. Each offering pieces of the puzzle and fresh perspectives that challenged and enriched our understanding, compelling us to reconsider our goals and strategies in light of a broader, more interconnected reality. Yet amidst the beauty and wisdom, shadows loomed large for rival factions driven by fear, ambition, or desperation that sought to seize the artifact for their own ends, igniting conflicts that tested our resolve and forced us to confront not only external threats, but the ethical dilemmas inherent in wielding such power, dilemmas that mirrored the internal struggles we each faced as we grappled with our own flaws, doubts, and desires. In moments of quiet reflection, We came to appreciate that our true adversaries were not just those who opposed us, but the divisions and shadows within ourselves and the world. Fear that paralyzed, pride that blinded, hatred that consumed. And that overcoming these required a courage far greater than any physical battle. A courage to face truth unflinchingly, to forgive, to unite, and to envision a reality beyond the constraints of past wounds and narrow horizons. Our travels took us beyond known realms into places where reality itself seemed to bend and shimmer. Ancient gateways to forgotten dimensions, realms where time flowed differently, and landscapes painted with the colors of dreams and memories. Each journey a test of faith and perception, expanding our consciousness and challenging the limits of what we believed possible, urging us toward a deeper understanding of the cosmos and our role as stewards rather than conquerors. Throughout these trials, the lines between magic and science blurred, revealing them as complementary forces rather than opposing ones, and inspiring innovations and rituals that fuse technology with ancient wisdom, creating new ways to protect, nurture, and heal, and demonstrating that progress need not come at the expense of tradition, but could arise from its careful integration and evolution. As we forged ahead, the vision of a renewed world took shape, not as a utopia free of struggle, but as a dynamic and living ecosystem where balance was maintained through respect, responsibility, and cooperation, where the scars of the past served as lessons and foundations of life, and where every voice, no matter how small, had a place and a purpose. And so, with hearts emboldened and minds illuminated, we stepped into the unfolding future, ready to face the unknown with hope and determination, knowing that the true power lay not in the artifact itself, but in the collective spirit of those who dared to dream, to build, and to heal together. As we ventured further into this intricate tapestry of existence, the lessons of unity and resilience echoed loud, reminding us that every action rippled outward in ways unseen yet deeply felt, shaping destinies and weaving connections across time and space that transcended our immediate understanding. For in embracing this interconnectedness, we found strength beyond the sum of our parts, a collective force that could heal fractures both personal and universal. Alongside this growing awareness came an urgent need to nurture the fragile ecosystems that sustained life itself, both natural and metaphysical, prompting us to cultivate stewardship and reverence for all forms of existence, from the smallest blade of grass to the vast cosmic energies that pulse through the fabric of reality, a sacred web that bound us all in shared faith and responsibility. Amid these revelations, we encountered ancient guardians and keepers of forgotten knowledge whose wisdom illuminated paths forward and cautioned against hubris, teaching us humility and patience as essential virtues in the face of powers far greater than ourselves, and urging us to seek balance rather than domination, harmony rather than conquest. The artifact, once a mysterious talisman, became a catalyst for awakening dormant potentials within ourselves and the world, inspiring innovations that blended art, science, and spirit into new paradigms of healing and creation, forging alliances between diverse cultures and disciplines that have long been isolated, reminding us that progress was best achieved through collaboration and mutual respect. Yet even as hope blossomed, the shadows of fear and greed persisted, manifesting in conflicts that challenged our ideals and tested the durability of our alliances. For the path to transformation was fraught with obstacles both external and internal, requiring unwavering commitment, courage to confront uncomfortable truths, and a willingness to evolve beyond old fears and prejudices. Through it all, the journeys transformed us, each hardship a lesson, each victory a step toward a more compassionate and enlightened existence. And in embracing the full spectrum of experience, we found that true power was not in control, but in surrender, not in separation, but in unity, not in accumulation, but in generosity. Our story became a living testament to the possibility of renewal, a beacon of hope for those who sought to rebuild shattered worlds and fractured hearts. proving that even in the darkest moments, the light of connection and purpose could guide us toward a future rich with meaning, growth, and peace. With this vision burning bright, we moved forward, ready to face whatever challenges awaited with open hearts and steadfast resolve, knowing that the journey itself was the greatest gift, and that together, we held the power to shape not just our own destinies, but the destiny of all who would come after us. Building on the profound insights and transformative experiences of our journey so far, Part 15 unfolds as we delve deeper into the essence of change and the intricate dance between light and shadow that defines our collective existence, where every moment becomes an opportunity to redefine our purpose and reshape the future with intentionality and grace. The realization that growth is never linear, but cyclical invites us to embrace the ebb and flow of life's challenges and triumphs, understanding that setbacks often harbor seeds of profound wisdom and innovation waiting to emerge when nurtured with patience and courage. As we move through this dynamic landscape, the relationships we have forged become lifelines, intricate threads woven into the fabric of our evolving world, reminding us that empathy and compassion are the currencies that sustain communities and inspire resilience in the face of uncertainty. Within this evolving framework, the interplay between individual transformation and collective awakening becomes increasingly apparent as personal breakthroughs ripple out, inspiring movements that transcend borders and ideologies, creating a tapestry of hope and shared intention that challenges entrenched systems of power and inequality. This awakening also calls attention to the delicate balance we must maintain between honoring tradition and embracing innovation, recognizing that the wisdom of the past provides a foundation upon which new paradigms can be built, fostering a synthesis of old and new that propels us toward holistic solutions for the complex challenges that lie ahead. As the story unfolds, we encounter new realms of possibility through the integration of technology and spirituality, where advances in consciousness exploration, sustainable practices, and interconnected networks offer unprecedented opportunities to heal divisions and nurture the planet. Yet, these possibilities come with their own set of ethical considerations and responsibilities, prompting ongoing dialogue about the direction of progress and the need for vigilant stewardship to ensure that empowerment does not become exploitation and that inclusivity remains at the heart of innovation. In this context, leadership evolves from hierarchical models to more fluid, participatory approaches that encourage diverse voices and foster collaborative decision-making, reflecting a broader shift toward decentralized systems that mirror the natural world's interconnectedness and adaptability. Throughout these unfolding chapters, the importance of storytelling itself emerges as a vital tool for preservation, education, and inspiration, with narratives serving as vessels for cultural memory, collective identity, and the transmission of values that guide future generations. The journey also reveals the profound impact of mindfulness and presence in cultivating resilience and clarity amid rapid change, as practices rooted in awareness and intentionality help individuals and communities navigate complexity with grace and groundedness. Ultimately, Part 15 invites us to recognize that the journey toward a more compassionate, just, and sustainable world is ongoing, requiring continual reflection, dialogue, and action, and that each of us holds the power to contribute meaningfully to this shared endeavor, weaving our unique gifts and stories into the ever-expanding mosaic of human experience and hope. Continuing from the profound themes explored in Part 15, Part 16, the final chapter, unfolds as a powerful culmination, intricate journey toward transformation, unity, and lasting impact, where all the threads of personal growth, collective awakening, and systemic change converge into a harmonious vision of the future shaped by conscious intention and compassionate action, revealing that the path to true fulfillment lies not in singular achievements or isolated moments, but in the ongoing commitment to nurture connection, justice, and sustainability across all levels of existence. As we embrace this final stage, The interplay between individual responsibility and collective empowerment becomes paramount, underscoring that every choice, no matter how small, resonates outward, influencing the fabric of communities and ecosystems alike, and that the legacy we leave is crafted through the daily practices of empathy, integrity, and courage in the face of adversity. This chapter also brings to light the essential role of education and storytelling as catalysts for generational change, where knowledge is shared not just to inform, but to inspire, fostering critical thinking, creativity, and emotional intelligence that equip future leaders to navigate uncertainty with wisdom and resilience. Throughout this expansive narrative, we witness the emergence of new models of living and governance that prioritize harmony with nature, equity among peoples, and a celebration of diversity as a source of strength rather than division, reflecting an evolved consciousness attuned to the interconnectedness of all life. Technology, while continuing to advance rapidly, is harnessed thoughtfully and ethically, serving as a tool to amplify human potential and environmental stewardship, rather than as a force of alienation or exploitation, reminding us that innovation without empathy risks perpetuating cycles of harm. The culmination of the journey is marked by a profound reconciliation of opposites, light and shadow, tradition and progress, individuality and community, where the acceptance of complexity and paradox fosters a deeper sense of peace and purpose, encouraging a holistic worldview that honors the sacredness of existence in all its forms. In this final unfolding, the power of ritual, ceremony, and shared experience is recognized as vital to sustaining the bonds that hold us together, providing spaces for healing, celebration, and renewal that rejuvenate both spirit and society. Ultimately, Part 16 offers a hopeful, expansive vision that invites each of us to step fully into our roles as co-creators of a world where kindness, justice, and sustainability are not ideals, but lived realities, reminding us that the journey of transformation is never truly complete, but an evolving dance that calls for perpetual openness, learning, and love. Thus, with the closing of this chapter, the story extends beyond words, becoming a living invitation to embody the change we wish to see, to nurture the delicate web of life with conscious care, and to carry forward the luminous legacy of this shared journey into the unfolding horizons